Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to Paul's Monday Market Update, number 198 for Monday, 6th of October, 2025. I hope you're all well. I hope you survived Storm Amy. I hope you're ready for a storming week in the markets in the first full week of the new quarter. As always, just before we crack off, if those of you joining us in the live session, if you confirm that you can hear my voice and see the slides, that would be very much appreciate it, just to make sure that the technology is working in our favor. I think the YouTube live stream didn't want to click in today and stuff, so we'll just be in here today. Apologies if you're watching this later. For those of you joining us for the first time, the Monday Market Update is just that. Okay, it is literally me flying through as much as I can fit in the next 25 to 30 minutes. Okay, trying to share with you as much as I can. I'm taking a look at the strength and weakness within the FX markets, looking at a few charts of interest you may want to add to your watch list, and then having a look at the live markets themselves. It is not a signal service. It's not trade recommendations. It is just me sharing what I'm looking at, which might be of relevance or interest to yourself. As always, you are very welcome here, but just remember you're always responsible for your own trading decisions. If you want a little bit more education this afternoon, I'll be doing the Active Trades Monday Market Matters webinar at 2 o'clock London time. Today's education element will all be on about your first trading routine, the importance of a trading routine and how to build it. You can either join it on the website or register using that QR code if you want to join in. And also, we are into calendar Q4 of 2025, and so we'll be starting tomorrow the Q4 VTP Trader Accountability Group. So if you want some help or support in building discipline, accountability and consistency, you can join us for that. Either just ping me a message, or there's a bit.ly code or a QR code there if you want some more help. All right, let's get into the analysis. Right, so if you're new to trading or new to joining us, you might be looking at this wondering what's it all about. This is just some clips out of my own model that I do at the weekend from my own analysis, just looking to identify where's the strength, weakness and trends and momentum in markets. So what is this telling us? How can I actually use this to help myself? Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are into week 41 of the year. Okay, as you can see there. Where is the strength and where is the weakness? Well, strength, Swiss franc, okay, remains top of the pile, and we've had euro remains in second place along with it. What we have at the bottom of the pile, okay, is Canadian dollar and Kiwi dollar. Listen, Kiwi dollar's been there for a while. I suspect what we will see is that we will probably see a change this week, in that we had Japanese yen, okay, at the end of last week, sort of working its way up to fifth, but that was clearly the sort of the pump before the dump. We had the Japanese elections there, okay, well, sort of Japanese selecting their kind of a new prime minister, a first female prime minister, and invariably that had an impact of basically dumping the yen at the open yesterday, which also had a bump on the Nikkei, and so hence why you can see from sort of market open here, that's why Japanese yen there is just so weak. Okay, and we'll take a little look at the actual live markets there at the moment. Sterling remains a kind of middle of the pack there. Okay, it's sort of neither here nor there really. It's been there for the the last few weeks. I don't really expect much of a change until we actually get the budget. There's an awful lot of what should we say? An awful lot of bad news, okay? An awful lot of ideas being kicked about, okay? And I suspect, we will just see basically hanging fire until we get some data on that. Interestingly, for those of you who join us for the VTP Stage 2 call on the Tuesday lunchtime, well, then invariably we do take a look at the kind of the COT report and the insight on the Commitment of Traders report looking at the sterling futures itself, and that's quite an interesting picture there with that at the moment. And it's kind of reflected in terms of sterling when we look at the kind of the STAM for sterling. Okay, some of them are in shorts. Okay, a couple of them are in buying environments. Right, and that probably just shows the mixed picture that we have going on there. Dollar, okay, just didn't really, it's holding up there and sort of kind of, it's at the sort of lower end of the stand. But, when we look at the live charts, we'll see how that is starting to change this week. And Aussie dollar remains quite firmly and quite happily in third place. When we look at some of the indices and commodities, well, you can see there's an awful lot of green there. Okay, all of those American indexes are in strategic buying environments, which is fascinating considering that the actual federal government is effectively shut down. Effectively that we didn't get NFP numbers on Friday precisely because of the shutdown. Okay, and we'll wait to see what, if any, resolution there is for that. But it didn't stop the American indexes having a good week last week, which we'll look at in a moment. And as we said, Nikkei, okay, has basically continued to push its way to highs, off the back of the political events over the weekend. FTSE's had a bump, and even the DAX, as we'll see, has kind of come out of its tactical short. It's had quite a big bump there last week, so we will look at that in a moment. Not unsurprisingly, gold and silver still remain strategic buy. Bitcoin had a good week, and that has gone back to being a strategic buy. And the VIX is all bullish, so everybody's giddy, everybody's happy, everybody's ploughing on to new highs. Okay, and we'll look at the live charts on that in a moment. Everybody's a bit happy and giddy at the moment. We shall see how long that lasts for. All right, so here we are, a few charts of interest. These are just charts that you might want to add to your watch list. There's something going on with them, or you can learn from it, okay? Or you can just, it's in the run up to earnings. They're just simple weekly charts, okay? That just share with you. And as I said, you might want to add to your watch list. Who is this? PLTR, Palantir, okay? Israeli US technology company, okay? Deals an awful lot with defence and government contracts. And as you can see, that has been in a pretty great trend, hasn't it, for the best part of sort of 18 months, 2 years. Really has been from being back here around about $20. As you can see, we recently tickled under $190 there. Okay, so there's been that's been some great move. There has been an awful lot. They're in the news an awful lot at the moment for good and bad reasons. Okay, there was an interesting point for those of us in the UK over the weekend where the guy, sort of, I think it was the CEO owning Palantir, said that they will have nothing to do with Starmer's digital ID plan, which came as an interesting surprise that they don't want to touch it. And it's just that's just another, let's say, another blow to Starmer and his digital ID plans. Okay, it's as I said, the Starmer has the best sort of reverse Midas touch I've ever met in any kind of person or politician. But even if Palantir aren't getting involved in a big project like that, that in itself tells you it's poor. But anyway, as I said, they've been getting a lot of media attention, and I was interested here that we kind of had a little bit of a we went parabolic, vertical, and came right back down. And then, as you can see, we've kind of formed what, double top. And last week, what did we print? That is a bearish key reversal. Price pushed to a new high, but rolled over and closed beneath the low of the previous week's candle, which in itself was a bit of a spinning top indecision candle. So, I wonder whether all of that media attention is just basically changing the sentiment. I wonder whether there is now room for us to at least drift our way sort of towards that kind of 160 area, the sort of 20-period moving average, which has acted, as good support in the past, and we've run away from it. I wonder whether there's a chance for like a little bit of profit taking, a bit of a breather, moving down there, and then that becomes a kind of a major decision point there. Does it rally its way to new highs, or does it break and roll lower? Okay, so at the moment I would be very short term. I'd be bearish on that. Okay, looking to see if it drifts its way back into this kind of what I'd probably call like a ledge there at 160, and then that's its next decision point on Palantir. Another one here, Delta Airlines. Those of you who join me a lot will know I take quite an interest in the aerospace and defence sector. So Delta Airlines are they've got their earnings this week. Okay, I should say that for those of you who use TradingView, I kind of post all this on TradingView on FX Trader Paul there. Okay, you can follow me, you can get the updates as I send them through. But I said this is Delta Airlines, and if you look at most of those American airlines over the last few weeks, they've had a pretty miserable sort of last few weeks since people come back from the summer holidays. Airlines generally and the Jets ETF have had a pretty, there's been pretty forlorn few weeks, shall we say? But Delta Airlines is, I would suggest, is back to its like weekly 50-period moving average. Yep, it did print a sort of a pin bar there, okay, reversal candle, even though it was a bearish close, okay, it still closed higher than the kind of previous week's open, just by the skin of its teeth. And as I said, we have got their earnings on Thursday before open, and so now I would view this as we're at a bit of a decision point here. We'll come back to it in terms of the weekly 50. And is the earnings going to be a catalyst for its next move? Okay, so if the numbers are good and if we get generally good market sentiment, well, then definitely 60 has to be its next move, and then you're really looking up to 62 to 64. In those areas, those kind of recent highs there. That's what I'd be looking for. Okay, for this week. And if the numbers are poor, we generally got poor market sentiment, well then I'm looking to see can it break? If it basically opens and drops and closes beneath the low of last week and the 50-period moving average, or maybe even the 20, if the numbers are bad enough, to me that would be pretty bearish, and then I'd be looking for a short-term move down towards that $50 area. So we're at a bit of a decision point here, so you might want to watch to see how that plays out this week, especially after its earnings on Thursday. Okay, and finally, before we switch to the live markets, SWBI, Smith and Wesson, all right? Smith and Wesson make, guns, all right? Simple as that. We looked at them quite a lot during the COVID lockdowns because people were buying them up in America, left, right, and centre, understandably so. But clearly, my view would be that, since then, this weekly chart over these last couple of years, we have been in, that's quite a significant downtrend, isn't it? Quite a nice downtrend. Price has just worked its way lower. It's been beneath its 20, its 50, and 200 period moving average. And when we're at this line here's the big round number of $10. We moved lower, over the summer, but then actually, as you can see in the inversely correlated with airlines. I don't know whether that's got anything to do. We've actually had a little bit of a move up there, haven't we? So from being sort of just under $8, we've moved up, and this is why it's of interest to me now. Is that once again, okay, I'm interested when markets and prices are at decision points. For me, that is the weekly 50. It is the $10 number, okay, $10 big round number, which we can see, we have used in the past. And also last week we printed, even though it was a bullish close, we closed beneath the 50, beneath 10, and that for me would be a bearish pinball. So, in the world's worst pun, does it have the energy to shoot its way through resistance and get back up? I'd say above $11. Really, does it have the energy to shoot its way out, or does it not? And actually, this is pointing us down towards lower prices, and so I'd be looking at towards the 20 at around just sub 9. And then you're looking at 8, okay, where those recent lows are. So once again, we're at a decision point there in Smith and Wesson, and that's where I'll be looking at to see, how does that play out over the next couple of weeks. All right, so it might be worth, as I say, adding to your watch list to see how that plays out. Okay, so there you go. There's some charts of interest for you. Let's move across to the live markets and see what's going on there. So just bear with me a moment, and we'll switch across. Okay, so here we are. I've got sort of my indices charts up here. Hopefully you can still hear me. Hopefully you can still see as I said, live charts. So what have I got on here? This is like an indices profile for the most part. I've got kind of weekly oil, West Texas. We've got the Dow on the weekly, NASDAQ on the weekly, S&P 500 on the weekly, Russell on the weekly, the FTSE on the weekly, the Nikkei on the weekly, and the DAX on the weekly. Okay, so those of you who joined us last week, we talked about, were we taking a little bit of a pause, okay, at the price action. It was all a little bit sort of kind of spinning tops, maybe hanging mans, okay, high wave candles, depending upon how you like to define them. Okay, I'm just saying, was that happening as we were running in towards the end of the quarter, and also US shutdown, etc. But as you can see, last week, there was not really a problem there with those US indices. Okay, everybody was, everybody's happy clappy. All right, everybody, as I said, everybody's a little bit giddy, everybody's a little bit excited. Even if we look at like kind of S&P 500, shall we? Let's, the sort of the big daddy. My charts are getting very slow again today and stuff. It's well. What we're looking at is invariably is a case of the of those charts kind of moving their way up. Yeah, come on. And the weekly chart has been fantastic. And if we look at the kind of the daily chart, as I said, we took a little bit of a breather, but as you can see, the last week or so, we pushed our way higher to daily wise. We closed at new highs. Yep, Fridays was a bit of a reversal pin bar, but you can see already we're working our way through there. So I will be intrigued to see whether that continues. All right, that is still, that price action is still bullish when you're looking at that on that daily chart. That is still, making higher highs, higher lows. All right, so the trend, the sentiment, okay, is bullish. I know my STAM saying it's strategic buy as well. So, as I say, when it's clearly like that, what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be particularly fighting it. That's not a smart, that's not a particularly smart move. And pretty much most of those other American indices are, they're operating exactly the same way. And probably what's more of interest is some of the other indices. So here we go. We looked at, we talked about Japanese, okay, the elections there, and what we can see is that that has pushed Nikkei to those kind of new highs. But kind of probably the one that's it sort of interested me or has kind of surprised me the most has been the DAX. We've talked about it, haven't we, for the last few weeks about how we'd had a real kind of real scrappy summer markets, but that we were beneath the weekly 20, but holding beneath it. We had that was the week before last was a bullish inside bar pin bar. And as you can see, we've really gone from one side of it to the other, really, really real strength there coming out of the DAX. So, you can find lots of reasons of that, whether that is once again just an anti-US, anti-Trump move because of the shutdown of the Federal Reserve affecting people's confidence in the US. Whether that is the announcement Germany announced last week and stuff about they were sort of going to get involved in space and stuff. So I've not really done that since the days of Werner von Braun, but we'll leave that for a different time and place. Some of you might actually look at this on on the daily chart. Okay, so some might say, well, actually, Paul, that is a bit of an inverse head and shoulders that we printed there, and that morning star formation on the daily chart is what has kind of given us that, and we've worked our way up. Absolutely. So as I said, we can see for most of September, we just spent really going in that tight sideways range, but we've blown out. And I'd be the first to admit that I had more of a kind of a bearish sort of sentiment if you held a gun to my head. But actually, you can see it has just blown its way through there. Okay. And as I said, there's probably a lot of different reasons, but it's wanting to go higher. So why would you look to fight that? Now, talking of going higher as well, we've also seen that element in the FTSE as well, a little bit closer to home there. And as you can see, last week, we had a strong bullish week there. Now, whether that is once again like the DAX, whether that is just a rotation out of the US, people losing confidence in the US and rotation into other markets, namely DAX, FTSE. Yep, it might be well be that. Could it also be that Reeves and the Labour Party didn't specifically kind of hammer, basically. Let's say UK entrepreneurial or UK companies, okay, in their grandstanding last week at the Labour conference. Maybe there's some deals done in the back room. Who knows? but for whatever reason, all right, you can find your own reason. The FTSE continues to grind its way higher there, and you can see, and that's where we went last week. Okay, that's what we're playing with. That's where everything's working its way there. And there's as I said, when there is a trend, don't fight it. You want to find a way to ride it. And talking of great trends, we can have a quick look at gold and silver. So let's just hang on a minute. Let's bring up gold here. Da, da, da. So, we know that gold on the weekly chart has just been on a tear, hasn't it? Look at that. That's classical technical analysis. We had a pennant or a symmetrical triangle continuation pattern, and it's continued at an absolute tear there. And really, what's that? 39.32. Okay, it would not surprise me if we went to 4,000. All right, just 4,000 just becomes that big round number that we're working towards. And with that in mind as well, you can see the same on silver. Silver's done the same on the weekly chart. Once again, in the same way, gold to 4,000. It would not surprise me now to see silver to get 50. You can see the way it slides through 40. Only, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 weeks ago. Bang, and it's working its way up. That is quite some move there. Okay, and then with that also, we've also had that turnaround in Bitcoin. It's almost like maybe it's a kind of rotation out of the US and or rotation out of something, right? Because the US indices also pushed to highs at the same time as Bitcoin, all right, traded to a new high, okay, the weekend. Remember we were talking about how the 20 had been acting as dynamic support, and we're looking to see if it held, or whether if it broke. Originally I was looking at this being a lower high, this being an evening star, but we needed the 20 to break, and if it did, we'd go it down. But actually, it didn't. And I'm the first to admit I'm surprised to see how strongly it bounced its way up there. Okay, in the same way, DAX is a risk on sentiment. As I said, looking at the all the kind of STAM for the indices and commodities, it's all green. Okay, everybody's happy, everybody's giddy, everybody's risk on for the moment. Okay, and that's represented in there and what we can see. What we're going to do is, I think we're going to have a little look at. Whilst I'm just going to put this in because my screens are a little bit slow today and stuff. It's like every man and his dog is wanting to basically do that. So whilst that loads up, let's have a look at Japanese yen. Okay, because Japanese yen, they've been the biggest moves over the weekend. Okay, as I said, the election of the kind of new leader. Come on. Let's bring it up. Here we go. So what we've got is the Japanese yen here. Let's bring this up. It really has slowed down. Clearly, every man and his dog is on my internet at lunchtime. So what am I got here? I've got dollar yen here on the daily, pound yen on the daily, euro yen on the daily, Swiss yen on the daily, Aussie yen, Kiwi yen, Canadian yen, and the Nikkei. As we said, you can see Nikkei bang gapped up and has blasted away, but a lot of that will also be to do with the fact that the kind of yen has weakened across the board. We've got some really big gaps up there. I was watching a few people crowing this morning about how they had shorted yen going into the weekend. Now, fair play to them. In terms of they've all done very, very well. Personally, that is not my style of trading. Okay, sort of holding positions into a big event like that, a weekend event, is to me that is not a smart way of operating. You're gambling. You're not trading. You're not operating as a professional risk manager, because that could have gone a different way. And even with the same result, you're waiting to see how does the market react. So, yeah, as I said, there was a few people on there crowing about how great they were, but yeah, my view would be you got lucky, all right, and getting lucky is nice, but you can't build a career as a trader relying on luck. So, well done to you, those of you. If you're smart, you'll bank some of those profits and put it into and siphon that up and put it into a kind of a strategic reserve for those days when you try the same tactic and it works horribly. But anyway, you can see what's happened there. Okay, in terms of the yen, all right, that's a reaction to to what people will perceive the changes. My admittedly superficial view is that I don't think things will change in Japan as much as maybe people are expecting. But then, as I said, I don't claim to be a Japanese expert. Ultimately, as a trader, you just have to trade what you see, and now you can see that that yen is weakness, and so the STAM will respond to that over the next couple of days and weeks, I suspect. Right, that's more like it. All right, let's talk about sterling then. Okay, so what we're looking at in terms of cable, all right, pound against dollar, all right, that is effectively, we had a little bit of a pullback last week, but if we look at dollar starting to strengthen its way, okay, and that's where that's where I see it there at the moment. It's a case of a little bit of I'd say a little bit of a coil up there. Part of that is a reflection of those kind of people's worries and concerns about the kind of US government shutdown, because I can't help but think that Trump's going to use it in some way to basically further his own ideas, and that means pound against yen. Okay, we can see that is that's pound jumping higher, but that's more on yen weakness, as we've seen more so than any particular strength. Pound against Swiss, we had been in a good strong downtrend. We've had a little bit of a pullback on that, okay, but the Swiss franc still remains there, strength. Okay, I was watching this kind of bearish pin bar off the 20 period moving average. Okay, in the last week, and at the moment we're still kind of sub that, still beneath that 20 period moving average. Interestingly, New Zealand dollar's been bottom of the pile, as you can see, and that's been reflected here. We've had sterling strength, but even that over the last few days, sterling has weakened against the New Zealand dollar. Aussie is in third, sterling is in fourth. Sterling's weakening, Aussie's continued strengthening, so hence why we're still, getting that to kind of grind lower in pound against Aussie. Pound against Canadian dollar, we're the push to highs and we're squeezing the bottoms there. Okay, pound against Canadian has probably been the most volatile, I'd say, over the last 6 weeks. That you want to keep a particular eye on. And then, let's see if we can finish off on euro against sterling in terms of looking at how that has been on the daily chart. We talked about it last week, as in that we had once again pushed away up to this 87.50 area, which is a significant level. But then even that, we've drifted a little bit lower now. Of course, we've got quite a few. Got Lagarde speaking this evening, and I think she might be speaking later on in the week. We've got an awful lot of central bankers speaking this week, especially the ones in the US, which, because of the shutdown, means that markets will probably give more weight to their commentary than the others. But Lagarde speaking this evening at 6 o'clock might overdo. So it's kind of that's sterling is kind of, euro has been strong as sterling's weakening, but you can see over the last few days euro has weakened a little bit, but it's still the 50 period moving average is still acting as kind of as dynamic support there. Right, I think I'd need to see a kind of a break and a flip of it to convince me that there is euro weakness and sterling strength going on there for myself. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's draw a close to it there, seeing as my internet is playing up. Okay, a few tech faffs as always. But anyway, let's draw it to a close there. I hope you found that useful. I hope that's given you a little bit of help, a little bit of insight that you can utilize in your own trading. As always, I wish you the best of success in your trading endeavors. Have yourself a fabulous trading week, and I will look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care, everybody, and trade well. Cheers.